Welcome to the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you level up your instruction in order to craft authentic learning experiences for both you and your students. I'm your host, Lee Tucker, a high school English teacher and ed tech enthusiast, and I want to join you on your journey to becoming the best instructor that you possibly can. So if you're ready, grab your adventuring gear and let's get going. What's up, 8-Bit crew? Today is Thursday, October 15th, and this is episode 12 of the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast. I've got a quick episode for you today. I'm on fall break this week, so all of this stuff is being recorded ahead of time, which means I don't really have a lot of news and updates because I'm recording this really quickly after last week's episode, so I haven't even read anything new that's going on since I last checked. I do have some great stuff coming up for you later in the boss battle. We're going to talk about how we can challenge students, but also add student choice in that to make it a little bit more palatable for them. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but first, let's go ahead and open up the treasure chest for today. Today's treasure chest contains a neat little website I found a couple of years ago, and that is IORAD, I-O-R-A-D. IORAD's a really cool website. Basically what it does is it will allow you to record interactive tutorials. What I mean by that is that there's an extension that you'll start, and literally as you go through the process of clicking and typing and all of that, it's going to record screenshots and instructions as you go along. So let's say you've got something in Google Docs that you want your students or maybe some colleagues to know how to do. Rather than trying to describe, well, click on File and then click on this, and then you're going to go to this menu and all that. You can use IORAD to actually put that all together for you. So when you click on File, it records a screenshot and it records, click File. And you go through the whole process, and then at the end, it creates a few different ways that they can interact with it. So one is a very interactive actual tutorial that when it says click on something, they will actually click on it. Another one is just a kind of a screenshot slideshow almost that you would click through, that students or others can click through and follow the process on their own accounts. And then also you can put it into a PDF version to print out and hand out to others. So that is IORAD, I-O-R-A-D. It's an extension and a website for Google Chrome. It's a wonderful way to create some great tutorials. All right, well, that will take care of this quick intro. That means we are heading right into the boss battle. So go ahead and sharpen up your swords and get ready to level up that craft. Up next, we're talking about how to implement student choice in the class. I want to start today with a story that is more of an experience that I've had in recent years with my daughter. And if any of you have children, I'm sure you've had similar experiences like I have. The last few years, we have been trying to teach her how to swim. So in the summertime, we would head out to the pool and we would work on helping her kind of develop the skills and techniques to learn how to swim on her own. So we would head to the pool, jump into the shallow end, and my wife or I, we'd hold her in the water, teach her how to kick, move her arms, all that kind of stuff. And it was a struggle. It was not going very well. She would get very frustrated and upset when she couldn't do it. We would try to let her do it some on her own or with some flotation devices or anything like that, and it still wasn't going very well. And she would want to swim in the shallow end, hanging onto the side and all that kind of stuff. And so we really kind of felt like it hit a wall and we weren't making a lot of progress. But then we took a trip down to Florida and we were hanging out at the beach, hanging out at the pool. And all of a sudden, my daughter decided that she wanted to go into the deep end. And we were pretty hesitant about it because, she couldn't swim. But she was very insistent that she would go out into the deep end and didn't need her floaties and all that kind of stuff. And so reluctantly, I took her out there and I kind of, I was holding her and she was kind of hanging on to me. And so I would just tell her, all right, push off and swim. And so the first time we went out there and the first time she did it, she actually succeeded. She pushed off and, she wasn't going very far, but she was staying afloat. She was moving and, she was learning how to swim. It was just kind of like all of a sudden it clicked with her. And what I realized is that one of the reasons she was able to be successful in that situation was because she was not being overly supported. Before then, when we were practicing in, the shallow end, she had me hanging on to her. She had her floaties on. She had the wall of the pool that she was hanging on to. And so she was relying on all of those different things that were not pushing her to learn how to swim. But then all of a sudden, when she's in the deep end with no floats, no support and all that, she has to learn how to do it. It's kind of like, the phrase we have, sink or swim. And, she decided swim. And she did it, and she did it really well. And then after that, she was so excited about it that she wanted to keep doing it. And after that, we couldn't get her out of the pool hardly because she was just so thrilled that she had learned how to do it and wanted to keep doing it. And all that is to say is our students can often be the same way. Our students get so used to having those kind of crutches in the classroom to rely on that they don't actually develop a lot of those skills. And I say my daughter didn't have all those the support and all, but she did have me. I was behind her the whole way, but I wasn't hanging on to her. I wasn't doing anything other than just being near. That way, if anything did happen, I could step in. And so today I want to look at how we can work to challenge students more to essentially kind of throw them into the deep end of the pool and help them learn how to swim. And I want to talk about how choice can be a very integral part of that learning experience. So before I get into it, I did want to just throw this little kind of disclaimer out there that when we talk about using choice in class, I'm not talking about just doing whatever you want in class. I'm not saying throw all the content out, all the curriculum and all that kind of stuff. It's more about finding different ways to add options and add choice into what you're doing in class to help engage students a little bit more. So with that being said, I want to look at some different ways that we can challenge students and push them by integrating choice. When you give them options, a lot of times what you can do is you can take those standards and you can take those skills and actually challenge students a whole lot more with that by getting a little bit more buy-in from them. Now, obviously, I'm coming from more of an English background, so a lot of my examples and the things that I have done with student choice are definitely more geared toward English language arts types of assignments, but this stuff can still work in most other content areas. So as I'm going through this, keep in mind about thinking through how this could be applied to your specific class, your specific content area. So the first place I want to start is with the content itself. Keeping in mind that a lot of standards now are more skill-based, what this means is that we are able to free up some of the content stuff and allow our students options for that. And I can't really think of a better example than an English class, because like me, most of you probably came up in a school where in English, in literature, you read all the classics, because that's what we do, right? We read all this literature because it's classic literature. There's a reason people have always read it, because it's great and wonderful and all that. And the problem is, with me, even as an English teacher now, it turned me off from reading a lot. Being forced to read a lot of stuff that was just not that interesting to me. I'm a pretty nerdy kind of guy. I like fantasy. I like science fiction. I like that kind of literature. And I never got to read any of that in middle school and high school and college, anything like that. And so that was hard. But when I sit down and look at standards for English and literature and all that, none of it's really specifically connected to a specific genre. And so take something like theme. Theme can be developed in any kind of story. And so by allowing students options for that content, I can actually give them tougher assignments because they're reading something that is interesting to them. So a lot of times I like to try to give them choice, whether it's complete freedom over it, or sometimes I will give them a list. So right now they're working through a literary analysis assignment, and I picked about 5 or 6 short stories for them to choose from. And by doing that, they have little short descriptions of it that they can pick from to find a story that's at least more interesting to them than the other ones. And also the choice gives them that idea of more freedom. So it's not just me forcing something on them, it's me giving them that freedom, that choice. And so think about ways that you could take content in your standards and give students some different options for what they are looking at. So if, in a science class, maybe it's some different topics that they can look into, different areas of your class that they might research or do an experiment on or something like that. If it's math, maybe you have them come up with some of the questions, putting stuff into word problems or something like that. But again, get creative with the kind of content that you put out there for them to give them some of those options. The next thing I look at is pretty similar to content, but it's the idea of letting them choose topics. And this is definitely something I utilize in my class a lot. So when we're working on something like persuasive skills, you can be persuasive with any kind of topic. And so that's one of the first things we do is I'll get them to brainstorm different topics that they're interested in or topics that they feel strongly about. Because again, if they are passionate about the topic, then they are more likely to put more effort into what they're doing, which then means that I can push them beyond what I might normally do if I'm just assigning them that topic. And so I utilize that a lot. And again, it doesn't always have to be 100% freedom. There are times when I will take a general topic and have them pick from some of those different areas. One of the projects we did last year, I had my students pick from the United Nations Sustainable Goals, and there's about like 21 of them or something like that. And so I gave them that list to pick from, and it was a lot of different issues like environmental issues, racial justice issues, poverty issues, and all that. And I told them to pick from that list something that they felt strongly about, and a lot of them were able to really buy into it and put a lot of effort into it. And what they came out with on the end was actually something that meant a lot to them because it was a topic that they were passionate about, felt strongly about. So again, what are some different ways that you can integrate some of those different topics into your class? Now, the next thing dealing with choice is something that I'm sure I'll probably get some pushback for, disagreements with, and that is the idea of grouping students. Now, I'll say this kind of flat out. For the last maybe 2 or 3 years, I have never assigned groups to my students. I've always let them choose who to work with. And even on top of that, I have let them choose whether or not they want to work in a group. I know there's a lot of, collaboration skills that everybody should be learning and all of that kind of stuff. But I always try to create projects, assignments, anything like that with the mindset that I want to almost force them to work together. And what I mean by that is creating something that is not just a product or a composition that a single person could easily do by themselves while the rest of the group does whatever they want. So it could be something like, for example, having students put together a podcast. Well, that's an easy way that you can have a group of 2 to 4 students who still have different jobs and different things to do because they're having to break that larger thing up down into smaller pieces and assign different roles to different people, even though they're putting one single kind of product together. Somebody's editing, somebody's mixing, somebody's designing, all kind of stuff like that. And it doesn't have to necessarily be technology kind of things like that, but think about ways that, again, we're talking about challenging students more, giving them those larger things. And I always have that handful of students that it doesn't matter what I put together, they're still going to do it on their own. And for the most part, they're probably still going to do a really good job of it. But I like to give them the options of whether they want to work with someone or not, and also who they're going to work with. And the reason is I want them to learn how to think about the people that they are working with. So every time I'd say, you can pick who you want to work with, everybody in that class is heading right to their friends. That's pretty much a given most of the time. But what I've also observed is that those don't always work out too well. And so that's why I make it a point not just to throw out there that they can pick who they want to work with, but I follow up, I have them respond, I have them reflect, I have them evaluate some of these things. What's going well in your group? What's not going well? Is there anybody that's an issue? And I inevitably will get things like, well, so-and-so hasn't done anything. The 3 of us are doing all the work and this person isn't. And that's where a lot of times I'll step in and have real conversations with them and say, well, what's going on? Are you trying to get them? We talk about things like leadership and working together and collaboration. And I still don't make the decisions for them, but I talk with them to try to help them learn these ideas and learn these skills of how to deal with people, how to work together. And I've had before even groups who by the end would not put that one person's name on their project. And, I'm very upfront with them and say, if somebody's not putting the work in, you don't have to give them the credit for the project. But I also add in there that they need to make it very clear to that person, if you don't contribute, you're not going to get anything out of this. And I've had groups that would kind of break apart because of that. Somebody was not putting the work in, and so they just said, you're not going to be a part of our group anymore, and that individual did their own little thing. I've also had the other end of the spectrum where when the groups had that kind of sit-down conversation, that person that wasn't doing actually did start to contribute because they didn't want to work on their own. And so it goes beyond just let them pick their groups. It's what's the purpose behind that? Make sure you have a purpose in giving them that choice and those options, that we're not just working as a group. We're learning some of these people skills, some of these collaboration skills, some of these leadership skills. I've really seen students develop some incredible leadership skills just from this simple idea of giving them choice in who they work with. Now, another area that we can offer students a lot of choice is just the process, the way that they approach their work, the way that they organize information and all that. And this is another one that I think a lot of people can get really caught up on, because we like to see things our way. And, if this is how I learned how to do something, the process that I learned, then this is how my students should learn to. And I know just from the last few years, math has been like this thing, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen on social media where people that I'm friends with or whatever, I'm so confused about this new math. I don't understand. This isn't how I was taught how to do it. I'm going to teach my kid to do it the way I learned. That's well and good, but there are other ways. There are many ways of approaching some of these things, like math solutions and writing compositions and all that kind of stuff. And so I like to give my students the freedom and the leeway to approach an assignment the way that works best for them. And so in English, we have the writing process where you brainstorm, you outline, you draft, you edit, you revise, all that kind of stuff. I'll always advise them. I'll tell them, sitting down to do a quick outline, regardless of how long you take, it's going to be helpful, but I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do it. Again, I'll work with individual students as they go along. If they're struggling somewhere, I'll ask them, how are you putting this together? Did you just sit down and start writing? And if they say yes, I'll let's take some time to think about how you want to put it together. We might do a bullet list outline. We might do a brainstorm, word cloud, whatever. Ultimately, it's me trying to teach them how to come up with their own process to do some of these things. And I know a lot of content areas, you can give them that freedom of working through a process and developing their own process for doing something. Outside of maybe a standard that specifically outlines a process of doing something, we're not tied to what we learned as we grew up. Now, I will give them things that have worked for me, but then I always tell them it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you. And if they find something, I like to let them, share that. Tell me about it. Let me tell others about it, because that might be something that would work really well for other people who might be struggling. So think about ways that you can give them options through the process of putting something together. Now, the last one is the one that probably when we talk about student choice, this is probably the one that comes to people's mind the most, which is the product. What way can they show their learning? And this is, honestly, again, outside of any specific standards and skills we're trying to teach, this is the one that could probably be one of the easiest ones to implement into an assignment, into your classroom. It's just giving them different options of how do they want to show you what they've learned. I can take something like, I mentioned, persuasive argumentation earlier. Obviously, there can be an essay that goes along with that, but if all I'm looking at is can a student put together a coherent argument, writing may not be the best way for them to do that. So they can write an essay. Maybe they record a podcast where they debate with someone else. I did that last year for the first time, and that at the end of the year, that was the number one thing that students said that they enjoyed the most was putting together a debate podcast, because they got to actually utilize some of their argumentation skills. So I can do that. You can have them create videos. You can have them, there's especially with technology these days, there's no limit to the kinds of products that they can come up with. Plus, you can give them the options of utilizing things that they're already doing. I've got, some really artistic students that love to draw, and, anytime I can give them an option of doing something like that, I like to let them utilize it because, again, they're thinking, they're processing, they're working through those skills. And as long as they can show me what I need them to show me as far as standards go, then, I'm good with that. Plus, when they, like earlier, like I talked about when talking about topics, if they're putting together a product that they're passionate about, they're going to spend more time, they're going to put more energy and more effort into it, and you're going to get a better end product. So hopefully that just gives you some ideas of a few things that you can do to add choice into your classroom, and doing that in order to push students beyond. When we let them settle for kind of that mediocre because we're forcing stuff onto them, they don't get as much out of it. So push your students, challenge them, and then let them have that freedom and that creativity to show you what they're learning. All right, for this week's question of the week, I just want to know, simple and straightforward, how do you implement student choice in your class? I'm curious. I always love seeing new ideas and getting new information about how teachers are getting creative and using these ideas in class. So what are some things that you do to add some of that student choice to your classroom? Feel free to respond. If you respond on Twitter, make sure you use the hashtag 8bitcrew. Or if you want to go to the episode page on my blog at 8bitinstructor.com, you can leave longer comments there. Well, that will just about wrap up my fall break edition of the 8-Bit Instructor. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to connect with me on Twitter at Comic Socks and use the hashtag 8bitcrew. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to hit subscribe so that you can get new episodes each time that they are released. And more importantly, tell others about the show so that they can get connected. If you want to support the show, visit my Patreon page at www.patreon.com/8bitinstructor. Well, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys have a great week. Keep leveling up that teaching craft. And until next week, may your swords stay sharp and your shields hold strong. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check out the 8-Bit Instructor YouTube channel for EdTech tips and tutorials, as well as other content on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ComicSocks and use the hashtag 8bitcrew. See you next week. Hey, what's up, 8-Bit Crew? Today is Thursday, October something, I don't know.